doing? Thanks so much to Portugal and the city of Lisbon for welcoming us here today. It's amazing to be here. It's such an incredible place to visit. Thank you. My name's David Wallerstein. Yeah, it's amazing, guys. Thank you so much. I mean, the organization, everything is just amazing. This is my good friend and colleague, Daniel Wiegand, who is, to me, one of the most exciting founders in the world today, certainly that I've had the pleasure to work with. But we'll talk about that in just a moment.
Hello, Web Summit.
Thank you. One of the things I do in my role as a Chief Exploration Officer, I understand many people haven't really heard of that kind of title before. And I think it's worth explaining what we do and then how it relates to Lilium. The CXO kind of role is unique in that I'm trying to move the slide. Oh, there we go. Cool. There we go. And that we really think about the biggest challenges on Earth in this role with my exploration team and our colleagues at Tencent. What are the things that we need to get right as humanity? What is the trajectory of our planet? These are the questions that as we grew as a company, we finally started having some time to consider them, because in the early days of the company, you're struggling to provide your services, to have a right to exist, to survive, to be profitable. And then as we grew, we could start asking, okay, like, what are the things that we need technology to do for us? How do we use our tools to solve the greatest challenges? And to me, the big headline is that we're heading to 10 billion people by 2050. And this is going to happen in the context of change. Things like climate change. That means dynamic weather patterns. And that will have an effect on global agriculture and energy and water, and spin-off effects that will even involve human health, like the relationship between air pollution and cancer and so on and so forth. How do we prepare for a world with 10 billion people where everyone has the ability to eat and improve their lives and move forward? And how can we make technology do that for us? In thinking about these challenges, there's two main trends that I've been thinking about in particular, and I was thinking about before I met Daniel. And they're separate trends, but they're overlapping. One is a global urbanization trend. 55% of humanity today, it's 7.7 billion people, live in cities. But that's going to go to 65% by the year 2050. And that's with 10 billion people. So we're basically going to add 2 billion people into our cities around the world. And if you look at the developing world, the growth of cities is absolutely extraordinary. At the same time, we're building more roads. We sell 100 million cars a year, roughly, on Earth. Less than 1% of them are still electric vehicles. So as we sell 100 million cars a year, we're creating these little monsters out there that say, feed me, feed me. And what do they need? They need oil. They need energy. They need gasoline. If they're a gas-powered car, for the rest of the life of that car, it needs gasoline. 700 billion barrels, 700 billion barrels of gasoline that we're using a year. And then you have road costs. Roads are the single biggest infrastructure investment area on Earth, okay? $1.5 trillion a year, and that is the forecast going forward, that we pay city by city, country by country, but it aggregates to this massive number that's bigger than energy, bigger than water, bigger than any other infrastructure area on Earth. And the trend line with these two overlapping investment areas is what we all experience probably in most of our daily lives, unless someone here is living in the countryside and has a really good situation. You should probably tell us about it later. Urban congestion. It can only get worse unless we do something differently. You add more people, more cars, more roads, at some point there's going to be congestion. There's going to be more congestion. So we ask questions like, can we do this differently, or is this it? Is this the best we can do at humanity? If you think about the next 30 years, is this all we can do? We just settle on the existing architectures, the existing ideas? Or can we do things differently? Can we merge the urban life that we all like to lead, to be professionals and enjoy services, with the rural? Could we see grandma and be back to work during the day, you know, grandma in the rural industry, in the rural areas and so on and so forth? How do we merge this? Is it possible to find a technology to do this? And I started thinking more, what if you could have two main components of your future human mobility infrastructure? Renewable green electricity that actually drops in price as you build out more and more renewable green electricity, because it has really zero marginal cost. And air, the air that we get around us for free. Is it possible? And that's the question 2.5 years ago I posed to my good friend Daniel, well, actually, he posed it back to me the other way, to be quite honest. But it's still rocking my world today. Daniel, tell us more about how this might actually be possible for real.
Thank you, David. I believe this is very much possible. I was actually a student sitting in my dorm room in Glasgow, and like any good aerospace engineering geek, I was studying aerospace engineering. I was watching videos of fancy aircraft on YouTube. And one of the aircraft I saw was a military vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, the V-22 Osprey. And I thought to myself, what if we would take this sort of aircraft architecture, repurpose it for the civil use, for a commercial service with passengers? And if we would be successful in doing this, we would basically be able to solve all the problems that David just mentioned in one go. We would get a new transportation system that doesn't need roads, railways, tunnels, or bridges, something that's emission-free if we make it electric, something that can go much faster than the cars we have today, and something that adds a third dimension to the capacity of our transportation system today. So I found my three co-founders, and together in the year 2015, we set out and gave ourselves the vision of creating and delivering a world which enables anyone to fly anywhere and anytime. We founded Lilium in the year 2015 in Munich, and now, 4 years later, we have a team of almost 400 people working on this project, and we have a beautiful aircraft which we call the Lilium Jet. The Lilium Jet prototype, as you can see in the video right now, is a full-size, full-performance prototype, space for 5 people. It's controlled from the ground, and it takes off vertically like a helicopter and then transitions from vertical into horizontal flight using the all-electric engines and thrust vectoring to control the aircraft. So here we go. We have a fully electric, fully battery-powered aircraft that can fly 300 kilometers on one single charge. It flies in cruise flight 300 kilometers per hour, and it's completely emission-free and extremely silent.
It's all electric, guys. People sometimes ask us, even after we explain, is it electric? Yeah, that's all electric.
And it lands in the same way as it was taking off.
It's flying right there.
Thank you. So what can we do with this? Some people are talking about urban air mobility, and the aircraft is perfectly suited to do this. But we have something wider in mind. We want to increase the radius of our lives. And what we mean by this is, if you look at the slide and you see the red circle, this is what you can do in a car in 1 hour. If you spend an hour in a train, this is what you can get to. And if you spend an hour in our service, this is what you can get.
Total
so
game
we're giving you 25 times more surface, 25 times more connectivity with a transportation system that comes at the same price like a taxi on the ground. And this is about the same step like from horse carriages to cars. Suddenly we're able to connect areas which were multiple metropolitan areas into one large metropolitan area with a completely new level of connectivity. And we're not just able to, for example, replace a high-speed rail line that goes in one direction. Because the infrastructure investment in our case is so small, we're just building the first meter and the last meter, but nothing in between. We can create that sort of networks in a very fast time. Now think of what this means to our lives and to our countries. Suddenly we can live in the countryside, work in the cities, we find jobs way easier, we have a renewable energy for our transportation system, and because we don't have to make all these infrastructure investments, we can redirect public spending into different areas. Yeah. Now there's a few areas which are very exciting and interesting to talk about. One of them is safety. Safety is at the core of everything we do. Without safety, we would be nothing. Now, the good news is the Lilium Jet is designed to the same safety standards like a commercial aircraft, and these are pretty high. So if you today do a certain trip in a commercial aircraft, you're statistically way safer than doing the same trip in a car. And the Lilium Jet is in the certification with the European and the US aviation authorities. And the requirements they have to meet is, for example, it has to be certified for 10 to the minus 9. So what does that mean? It means an aircraft, a commercial airliner and the Lilium Jet are designed such that they only have one catastrophic failure, or less than one, in 1 billion flight hours. Or in other words, less than 10 to the minus 9 failures per hour. Now, how are we achieving this? The key here is redundancy. This is why a Lilium Jet has 36 engines, has 3 batteries, has 12 independent data buses, 4 flight control computers. And the redundancy means whenever one of these components fails, you have a second one that takes over the job and brings you safely down to Earth. So this is because we all want to get safely home in every flight. Now, a second interesting area is noise. We have been thinking about noise from the first day. And this is why we're using ducted fans as a propulsion technology. This technology allows us, in comparison to open propellers, to capture and dissipate the noise within the ducts in acoustic liners before it propagates into the environment. And what we have achieved with this and measured in the prototype is that the aircraft at takeoff is about the same noise level like a truck. Or in other words, to explain this, put it in context, if you take a helicopter and you're 1 kilometer away and you have a certain noise level, you can come 10 times closer to a Lilium Jet to get the same noise level. So the noise carpet on the ground we are creating is 100 times smaller than for today's helicopters. And we had to get this right because it's the opening ticket to our vision. If this is too noisy, none of us would accept it.
And to me, Daniel, it feels a lot like hair dryers going off. That's the only way I can describe it when you actually see the plane fly, is imagine 36 hair dryers on the stage here as kind of an analogy for how to think about that sound profile. It's absolutely extraordinary. And then no smell either. Whenever I ever saw something that flew, I was always used to smelling all the gasoline that's burning even when it's on the ground. This is an electric vehicle using renewable energy, ideally. So not noisy, not smelly. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
it's very human
different
friendly
way of flying. Then there's another topic, which is visual pollution.
Yeah, I thought it was quite helpful, actually, even for ourselves to envision this new world, because we found in discussing the Lilium model with different people around the world that when you think about something new, like something that can fly, you're not quite sure how it will affect the operations of a city. So we thought we'd make a simulation using the Unreal Engine, making things true to scale. Of course, this is a virtual representation, a simulation, but that would be, for example, what a Lilium Jet would look like at 300 meters away. And then we can see, another kind of line, something coming from, downtown to the airport would be at a higher elevation, like 800 meters. The point is you can barely see that plane. And you also shouldn't be able to hear it either. And this would be an example of a Lilium Jet taking off from the roof of a building. This looks like roughly a 10-story building or something like that. Very much something integrating into the operations of a city. And especially, it would take time for the density to build up. In the early days, it would be barely noticeable in any sense in a city, I think.
And the key point here is because we're using the third dimension for our transportation, we can eliminate the transit traffic from our perception. So as you could see in the video, the taxis, they are all not stopping in the point where we are, they are just passing. And if we use an airplane that flies in 1,000 or 3,000 meters from one city to the other, we don't perceive this transit traffic anymore. And today, more than 95% of the traffic we perceive in our cities and daily life is not going to the point where we are. And this is what we can remove. So to give you an idea how this is going to look, this is what we have here. This is what a structure we call a vertiport. It typically consists of a helicopter takeoff and landing surface and maybe 6 to 8 gates where we can charge the aircraft and passengers can board and deboard. And with a structure as simple as this, we can transport up to 1 million people per year. So we can replace entire high-speed rail lines with several of these structures. And this is how it's going to look from inside, to give you an idea of how this could look like. It's just a concept at the moment. Expect these to book them on a smartphone. Then you take maybe a taxi or an autonomous car to get to the vertiport. You spend maybe 5 minutes in the lounge before you move out to the airport, to the aircraft. And then the user experience is designed to be smooth and digital. And we also want this to be a human experience, an elegant experience, and something that's exciting. We're flying to the destination we want to go. So this is how it could look like in an urban environment, as a bigger port, for example. But what excites me even more is the small one in the countryside. Because
that one really excites me.
Yeah, we basically need a concrete surface and a charger, and suddenly a city is connected 360 degrees to their environment at maybe $500,000 of an investment. And these cities never had connectivity before because it was just prohibitively expensive to be highways or high-speed trains or anything else to connect these places.
And I love the idea of doing something off-grid even for the developing world, where you could have landing pads like this, perhaps even more simply, with just a windmill or solar power and charging locally, and you may not even have a robust road infrastructure to get to that point. You may not have an operating grid even, but you've got local power, and this could be a completely new paradigm for the developing world to get connected. A lot of that $1.5 trillion a year investment is going to be going into road infrastructure in the developing world, so just imagine the potential. It's a different paradigm for mobility options globally.
Exactly. We can do the same thing that mobile data did to telephones. With this, we were leapfrogging ground infrastructure. And for the developing world, we can do the same with this technology. Because most of the cost in our service is local. The aircraft depreciation is relatively low. And that means if the salary level locally is lower, the prices of the service locally are going to be lower. And this is actually the key point the founders and me had in mind when we founded the company. We said this has to be affordable for an average person using a car today. And we have achieved a business model with this aircraft that allows us to operate the plane at the same price like a taxi.
This is a really key point. It was so important for us when learning about the company initially years ago, and understanding Daniel's vision that this can be the same price as a taxi. And I know it's not easy for everyone to be able to take a taxi. They can be expensive, but it's still a very accessible price point. And that's essential for us.
And there's two reasons for this. The first one is with an average speed of 250 kilometers per hour, we're traveling 6 to 7 times faster than a ground-based taxi. As we are operating a shuttle service, we will also achieve 2 to 3 times higher load factors than a ground-based taxi. And these two things together allow us to do about 20 times more passenger kilometers with a Lilium Jet compared to a car on the ground, although we have the same number of seats. And this basically means even if the jet is 10 times more expensive to produce, and at the same time maybe our pilot has 2 or 3 times the salary, if he does in the same time 10, 20 times more passenger kilometers, the cost of the pilot per passenger is actually lower than for a taxi on the ground. And we find a similar situation on the energy side because of these two numbers. So what we have here is a comparison of the energy cost of one person for a 300 kilometers trip, assuming the load factors of these different transportation systems. So for a helicopter, we are at 108 euros. This is not really great for one of us. Then for the electric car, we have 9 euros in a ground-based service. And for the Lilium Jet, we sit somewhere around 6 euros.
Right, and Daniel, actually, so that €9 number, though, that's for electric cars. And we just talked about that electric cars are still less than 1% of sales, Tesla, and so on and so forth. What would it be for a gas-powered car, what we all tend to drive still now? How much?
Exactly. Depending on the country, it's 2 to 3 times higher. So guys, buy electric cars.
Yeah. Cheaper to go where you need to go with less cost of energy, right? But faster and better, right?
Exactly.
Reducing congestion, getting there faster. A green revolution can actually be better. It doesn't mean stepping back. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean doing less. It could actually mean doing more.
The key point is if we all take a Lilium Jet in the future and do our long distance trips in the air, we will as a society consume the same or less energy of what we consume today.
Daniel, where does it go from here? We start off, we begin deploying. How does this actually affect our lives? Let's think about just everyday people, you and me, people in the audience. Once this could be incorporated into our lives, and it should be and it will be. But how does it actually affect like how we live?
It will probably affect every single part of our life, because if we take a close look, if we look at the traffic jam outside when we came here and many other areas, our life is totally depending on the connectivity and the transportation system we have. That means if we have a transportation system like this one, we can suddenly live in the countryside and work in the city. We can make cities basically reach out by a factor of 5 into other cities and connect whole areas which were previously separated from each other. And this is something we can launch in the year 2025. By that time, we want to be operational in 2 or 3 cities on the globe. But if we fast forward like 10, 20 years from now, we would expect in 20 years maybe 50% of you came here in a Lilium Jet. Car ownership will have changed. You may use a ground-based autonomous taxi for various trips, but you will probably never use one again for a trip that is maybe longer than 100 kilometers, because you would be 5 times faster in an air taxi service that comes at the same price, and it would probably be autonomous.
And you could be like staying here in Lisbon, but you could go down to Algarve, have a nice dinner there, check out the beach, 20, 30 minutes, I don't know exactly how far that is, but come back to Lisbon and stay here. So you're still a customer of the city, but you're also exploring more of the local region. That's good for tourism, that's good for us as tourists. I mean, everyone wins. The thing that's most exciting to me, again, is that the green transformation that we need to have doesn't mean doing less or stepping back. It's really about having more options for humanity to develop, because we need them, because we are going to grow and we're going to have all these challenges. But it can actually be fundamentally better, and we can have a lot more room to explore our potential as people.
This is the core policy we follow at Lilium. We make a product that is better than what exists and is at the same time green tech. And this way we basically get people saving the planet and the climate who don't have this on their radar just because they love the product.
So we want to build it together with you. We need a lot of support. It's a new paradigm. When a new paradigm comes out, there's a lot of questions. Some people wonder if it's possible or not. But everything in life has to be built. It has to be created. It has to be accepted by the community. So we look forward to working with all of you, continuing the debate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye.